So today, we are looking at Wisdom still, and next week we're going to have Wisdom Sunday. I'm very excited about Wisdom Sunday. Wisdom Sunday is when our elders and pastors are going to share something wise with you. How about that? All right? It's really simple. I had one of the elders that sent me a message. I didn't respond yet, but it's really simple. What is something wise you can share with us to help us live out our life journey in pursuit of Jesus? It's really that simple. What wisdom has God given you to share with us? And I really look forward to that. And today, we're going to preach. Well, I'm going to preach, I guess. We'll see if it's good or not. I was just thinking about when I was in school, everybody had to have a form, and they had to fill out a form, and then you'd have to look at it afterwards to see whether or not you did all right. I prefer no form. So but if somebody feels like they need to give me one, that's fine. So the earth was without form? Yeah, no, that's a different thing, different form. All right. So today, the title of our sermon is Cite Your Source. Cite Your Source. And the subtitle is Investigating the Bibliography of Your Life. Now, what does this all come from? Well, it all started with this idea. You know, Paul says that we're living epistles. It means we're like a story that God is writing for other people to read, right? And I don't know about any of you. Some of you have been out of school for a while. I was out of school, now I'm in school. I hate bibliographies. I hate citing stuff. It's absolutely horrible. It's the worst thing in the world. Paula, take your scientific goody two-shoes. I love bibliography, and you can just go someplace else because I hate it. Yeah, talk about a tedious journey, right? Oh, my goodness gracious. But it's there for a reason. It's there for a reason because it acknowledges what our sources are. It acknowledges where we're getting this information. It acknowledges how we came to our conclusions. And today, I'm going to do something today that, because this may be the end of this series, I don't know, right? Because God is in control of this whole thing. We'll be journeying towards the cross, starting on the 30th and moving in that direction, but God may bring us back. But before we can even have an idea of moving on from this series, it's really important that we establish something. And I'm going to ask you a question, and it's easier than any of the questions that were on the little countdown video. It's actually the easiest question you will ever get in church. In fact, before I ask the question, what do you think the answer is? Jesus. So, who is the wisest person to ever live? So, if we finish this series without quoting Jesus, thank you. My daughter said that would be a problem. It would be a problem. So, I'm going to give you the greatest piece of wisdom that's ever been uttered in the history of the universe. It comes from Matthew 22. And it says this in verse 35, because what's happening is all these really smart people, all right, are coming to Jesus, throwing all their special, wonderful wisdom at him, and he is just basically obliterating them. And then this guy's like, okay, I know how I can trap him, right? He says to the lawyer, asks him a question, testing him, teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? So which one's he going to pick? All right? Which one? Because they're all important. And Jesus turns to him and he says, you shall love the Lord. You understand this is not one of the commandments. I know it's close, but it actually isn't one of the commandments, though, are split into two pieces. The first part is loving God, and the second part is loving your neighbor. And Jesus says, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus says all of them. That's what he says, actually. He says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and foremost commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And he says, upon these two commandments hang the whole law. Upon these two things hang all wisdom for all eternity. You hear what I'm saying? This is what he says. He's saying that. Now remember, as we've talked and walked through this thing, right? We've talked about, hey, the wise person understands there is a way to live a blessed and happy life. But the wise person also knows, right? That we have to stand in this space of understanding that God is above us, his holy otherness. So we have to understand who and what God is, right? And we also know that knowledge is just knowledge, and wisdom is the application of that knowledge. And so we're not wise people just because we know what Jesus says. We're wise people when we live out what Jesus encourages us to do. You hear this, right? So we know, like this Matthew 22, who heard this for the first time today? Yeah, that's what I thought. We know this. We know this. But now can we live it? That's the division. That's the division between wisdom and knowledge. Can we live this thing out? So let's just be understanding this. So if we aren't living this, if this isn't how our story is being written, this isn't what our epistle looks like, all right, then it's time that we start investigating our life's bibliography. It's time for us to start figuring out what sources of knowledge we're actually living out of. Because if we were living out of only what Jesus was teaching us, then our life would reflect the wisdom he is giving us. So we need to start investigating our life's bibliography. We need to start citing the sources of our wisdom, of what we're actually living out. Because until we do that, we kind of just brush this off as who I am. Well, that's just kind of who I am. No, it actually comes from someplace. There is something being spoken into your life from someplace that is causing you to live out this life the way you are. And those choices, and this is, why do you have to cite stuff in a paper? Why do you need a bibliography? Because there's an acknowledgement that these things didn't come from nowhere. And brothers and sisters, God is telling us today that we need to acknowledge that the way we're living didn't just come from nowhere. So the wisest person, right, is what Jesus is saying. The wisest person is the one who is in right relationship with God and their community. That is the wisest person that you will ever find. And so what I want to do is I want to look at James, all right? And what I did, unfortunately here, somehow, is I'll see it on here, right? What's the first passage out of James you have? You have all of them, okay. And we're going to start here because somehow I skipped this. Now, we read this earlier in this series, but today we're going to focus on this because this is going to unearth how we can start seeing and doing what Jesus is calling us to. And so James says, who among you is wise and understanding? So he's putting a challenge out there. Which one of you is really a wise person? And he says this, the wise person will be proven wise by how eloquently they speak. That's not what he says. The wise person will be proven wise by his good behavior, his deeds, in the gentleness of wisdom. Now, we're going to unpack that in a moment. But what he says is that true wisdom, those who really think they are wise, are people who are showing with their lives, right, good things. Okay? And we'll unpack that in a second. Let's keep going. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and so lie against the truth. Keep going. This wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, and demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every evil thing. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peace-loving, then gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial, free of hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Amen. This is going to be one of those messages that we're probably going to squirm a little bit if we actually are going to take it for what it is. I certainly am squirming having to say it a little bit. But if this doesn't start to impact us, really, God has been doing the same thing for about 6 weeks here. I'm just going to be honest with you. We're basically preaching the same message over and over and over and over again. Wisdom is righteousness. Righteousness is being in right relationship with God and your neighbor. Really, that's what God is saying. And in order for us to do that, we have to start stripping away our default wisdom. The things that we think are wise because we just think it, or because we were taught it, or because it makes us feel good. And this is the bottom line. God is trying to tell you, there actually, brothers and sisters, there are only two sources of knowledge. And there's only two different places that we live out of. Either wisdom that has come from below, or wisdom that has come from above. And we need to be brave enough to look ourselves in the face and go, you know what? A lot of my life is lived out of the things that come from below. And so in James 13 through 14, this is what he says. He says, in verse 13, he says, "Who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good deed, his behavior, his deeds in the gentleness of wisdom." So our wisdom, our lived out reality, should be meek. That's what gentle, all right, that's the way this is saying. Should be meek. He's saying that a wise person, their existence is meek because they humbly understand their position as a sinful person, in contrast to God's glorious greatness. We are meek and humble because we recognize our deep need. This is what we talk about. Wisdom, what? Fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom. We talked about this already. We are meek and humble because we recognize our deep need for who God is, our deep sinfulness and inability to overcome it on our own, and we recognize what He has done for us. And in that place of gratitude and humility, we live out of that place. We're not people who are, so self-sufficient and so great. I don't know, even it's not even a word, self-great. There you go. Don't be self-great. Do you hear me? Don't be self-great. Hey, don't argue with me right now, JC. I'm just telling you, don't be self-great. This is really what it is. This is living out the greatest commandments, right? Loving others, and that's the deeds, right? Because he says, let it show in your deeds, right? People will see it in the way you treat others. And then being in right relationship with God, being in this space of gentleness and meekness and humility. And then in verse 14, he says, in contrast to that, he says, but if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and so lie against the truth. Okay, there is a lot here, all right? And we need to unpack this. He says, listen, if you are not living in such a way that the greatest commandment is evidently lived out in your life, okay? Can we just see it that way? Where we're not truly in right relationship with God and we're not really in right relationship with our community. If that's the case, there's some things going on. And there's some characteristics that we need to be aware of that wisdom, the outcome of that wisdom, what it looks like, okay? And the first thing that we see in this verse is it says bitter jealousy. Now let's just focus on jealousy for a second, because oftentimes we're like, well, I ain't jealous, right? Leave that to what's-his-face. I'm not jealous, right? That's a Jonas Brother problem. But that's not what this is really talking about, all right? It says it's fanatical. Now, let me understand this. I need you to understand something right now, because we live in an age of information. And there is wisdom being put out there for us all the time, at a level and at a speed that has never been done in history. And today, what I want us to really take a moment is I want us to really think about not just the wisdom we live out of, but the wisdom we cheer on, the wisdom that we retweet, the wisdom that we share. Just think about, because the moment we start sharing these things that aren't godly, but labeling them as Christian or what God would really want, we are actually spreading the disinformation we're so concerned about not spreading. So the first marker of this wisdom that is not godly is that it's fanatical. Now, on a good level, we can see this with Jesus in the temple, because it's the same word. So when Jesus is turning over all the tables and chasing out the moneylenders, he's being jealous for for the space that the Gentiles are supposed to be able to occupy. He's being jealous for the house of God. Zealous. Okay? It's the same word. It actually should be translated zealous because that's actually what it is even in Greek. But the point being is that this, while that is the one moment we see it kind of in the Word of God as a good thing, or when it talks about God being jealous of us, right, zealous for us, it also has this space that the moment it gets outside of that, it gets real ugly. So when you look at the roots of it, slander, so just understand this, slander, violence, and murder. Do you hear that? They're all the roots. All right, all of them come out of this zealousness. In other words, this jealousy, this fanatical, I'm right. This is right. Right? That whole thing, that is the root of murder and slander and violence. Right? That's what that's really about. So, I don't know what's happened. All of my stuff, I'm going to try just for a second, guys. I'm missing a lot of stuff here. So I'm going to see if I have to change a view here. Something is really weird. Yeah, it's disappeared. What is going on? Okay, I'm going to, just give me a second. What is going on? Okay, let's try it one more time. Yeah, it's not there. I'm out of here. Don't know why. I have most of it on there, so we'll be all right. So if you just give you this idea, all right? So it's fanatical, right? If you're really fanatical about what you think is right. So now, to understand this passage, some people think that he's talking to the false teachers. Others think he's speaking to everyone. I actually fall more in the category, I believe he's talking to everyone because he's not specific once he gets here. But it wouldn't matter because in our day and age, all of us think we're teachers anyways. All of us are sharing things. All of us are tweeting things. All of us are doing these things. So we all think we're teachers. We fancy ourselves as such. Because let me be really honest about it. You wouldn't be putting this information out there if you didn't think somebody else should know it. This is that kind of thing that is like assimilate or die. You know what I mean? Believe this or maybe it's better this way. If you don't believe this, you're an idiot. Man, or you're weak, or, you're stupid, or you're woke or unwoke, or you're just a sheep. Fine. Just be a sheep then. Bah, bah. Listen, it's true. I'm sorry, but all these words that I'm just throwing out there that we think because we have Jesus and we have the right answer, somehow we can be zealous and fanatical and just flat out mean, and then we can share these things because someone else said it. I didn't say it. I just think it's funny. No, it's not, actually. Because our conversations then are not an opportunity to uncover the truth and learn from one another. They're a platform for achieving like an already certain agenda that we have. That's not wisdom, not wisdom that comes from above. And furthermore, it says that it's bitter jealousy. Let me just look at that for a second. If you couple this idea with jealousy, it means anyone who doesn't see things the way we do, listen to this very carefully, is an enemy that needs to be destroyed. Rather than a brother or a sister or a friend or a neighbor that we engage kindly and humbly and persuasively with. You see this, we'll be celebrating and contributing to the humiliation and downfall of those who deserve it. because they don't see it our way, or because they have a certain base belief, or whatever it may be. Ha ha, look at those idiots. I told you, I told you, I told you. Is this getting a little uncomfortable yet? Then it says that this wisdom is selfishly ambitious. And I want you to hear what I have to say here, because I'm speaking through politics, I'm speaking through sports, I'm speaking through our relationships, I'm speaking through everything right now. I am not speaking to a side. In fact, I am so done with the political system in Canada and the United States that I am despicably disgusted by it. And I am so clear that we need to stop as Christians trumpeting and retweeting both sides, because their agenda is not Jesus. It's not. Both sides of the coin are selfishly ambitious. So truth may be the platform, right? But the agenda is the victory of one's own opinion, which means truth is actually subservient to the exaltation and justification of self. It's only true in as much as it serves my position. Other truths are lies if they expose my ambition, if they make me look bad. And that's why they can simply be omitted, and then it's not a lie. I'm just framing for you the truth by cleverly omitting the things that would make me not look so good. Okay? And we know this because we have fact checkers everywhere. Right? And the reality is that fact checkers on every side will always not fact check the things that they would like to be true. Let's just put it that way. And then finally, it is arrogant. Okay? It says that it's arrogant. This wisdom is arrogant. It's just simply this. There's nothing to be taught. Nothing to learn. Got the answers already. Right? Listen, there really is no need for me to listen to you. But there is a reason for you to listen to me. Now, I don't know if you are hearing me today, but a lot of us live out of this space. We wouldn't go around saying, yeah, I'm really a boastful and arrogant person and I'm selfishly ambitious. But the reality is the choices in our lives we make so that we can get ahead. And we will justify the expense it costs someone else. And that is not godly wisdom. So he says, so don't boast. And this is what I really need you to hear. Don't boast about how, look at what God is doing. This is, this, that. Don't boast. Don't assign God to the wisdom of this world. That's what he says. Don't assign God to the things that make you feel better. So boasting about being wise, right? When our source is not God's wisdom. So think about that. I'm boasting about how wise I am and all the things that, I'll put it this way. But I'll get there in a second. But when our source is not God's wisdom, what we're doing is we're taking a lie and we're promoting it as the truth. And this is the question, come on, guys. How could God want it any other way? This obvious, clearly God would want this to be this way. Clearly, this is what God wants. Now, is there a story you can remember where a wise creature promoted a lie as the truth to achieve an agenda, and people took it as great wisdom and lived it out? Do you remember a story anywhere? Have you ever heard a story like that before? Have you? Thank you, Doris. What's the source then of this wisdom, right? Can we call a spade today? Can you be brave enough to just see it for what it really is? Because in James 3:15, this is what he says. He says, this kind of wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, and demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every evil thing. So we talk about this. Earthly has like this negative nuance here. It would be like you were forgetting to see the perspective of how big God is. So this is the moment we stop to fear God and we start to put God on the same level as us. It's earthbound, all right? So this is an earthbound wisdom, and it is from demons. Now, I just want you to think at the beginning, go back to the beginning of, when God created the world, was there any earthbound demonic wisdom in the garden? There was not. But in Genesis 3, all right, this is what it says. Now the serpent was more cunning, more full of earthbound wisdom, natural wisdom, than any other creature because he was demonic. And he said to the woman, has God really said to you, you shall not eat fruit from any tree of the garden? Like, let's fact check this. Any tree? You can't eat any tree? And then she gets back to him. The woman said to the serpent, from the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat. I know what you're talking about. But from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat from it or touch it or you will die. And the serpent said to the woman, that doesn't make any sense. Essentially what he said, doesn't make any sense. So what you're saying is that you can eat everything but not that? Like, that's not wise. That doesn't even make sense to me, right? You're not going to die. Why would you die? Why would you die from that? Like, I just saw a goat eat a piece of that fruit yesterday. For God knows that on the day you eat from it, your eyes will be open, and you'll become like God, knowing good and evil. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, once she became selfishly ambitious. And she also gave some to her husband with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves waist coverings. Now let's just be clear about this. Where did this wisdom come from? Did God create this wisdom? Or is this wisdom that stands outside of the greatest commandments wisdom that comes from demons? Now, I'm not saying y'all are demonic. I'm not saying you're possessed. But I do think we have to dig deeper and go, you know what? Some of the things I'm doing, they really don't come from God. And where they're coming from is not just me being human. It's coming from something darker and eviler and uglier. And I need to stare it in the face and go, out. Because in verse 16 it says, for where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder in every evil thing. So essentially what is he saying? He's saying that this wisdom that's natural and earthly and demonic, the greatest expense that it has on civilization, on human beings, on community, is that it makes everything out of order and it allows evil to flourish. And I want you to think once back to Matthew 22. Jesus said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. That is right order. That is the wisdom that we have this relationship with God, and it's deep, and it's strong, and it's committed. And the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor in place of yourself. And what do we see in the garden at this moment? A breaking of relationship and a belief in who God is and what he says first. And then we see a choice of herself over anyone else. And he does the same thing, by the way. Okay? And all of this is broken. The relationship with God is broken. The relationship between one another is broken. Everything is turned upside down. And from there, evil rushes in. So had they lived out of God's wisdom. They would have remained in the garden, deferring to one another. Now, they live outside of the garden, broken in their relationship with God and trying to rule over each other. It broke relationship with God, created issues with their relationship with each other, and it was immediately out of order. And why? Because of a subservience to the devil? Because they became demon-possessed? No. Because they put self above all else. And that is the great lie. That you are the most important thing, that you need to take care of you, and that even if it costs somebody else, it's still better for you, you should do it. That is the great lie. That is the beginning of all sin. And I read this thing from Dennis Kinlaw. It's written in the Day with the Master. I want you to hear this today because I want us to understand why everything gets out of order. He said, Satan disguises submission to himself under the ruse of personal autonomy. Listen to this. He never asks us to be his servants. Never once did the serpent say to Eve, I want to be your master. The shift in commitment is never from Christ to evil. Hear this. The shift from commitment is never from Christ to evil. It is always from Christ to self. The shift, I'm going to read it again, in commitment is never from Christ to evil. It's never like, I choose sin. I'm going to commit myself to a life of sin. No, the shift is always from Christ as my center, as my guide, as my source, as my everything, to self. And instead of his will, self-interest now rules, and what I want reigns, and that is the essence of sin. So let's be honest. Let's be honest today about what sources we're living out of. Let's cite them. Let's name them. Let's acknowledge where their origin really is. Why do I find such glee? Why do I have so little self-control in sharing, in rejoicing in the annihilation of someone else? Why do I feel the need to be like, if you're not for us, you're against us, and you are on the other side, and you deserve to go down? Why do I feel like I need to be right all the time? Why are my choices always about supporting what makes me happy, comfortable, or supports my traditional position taught to me by the earth? Because if our sources cause us to stand outside of the call to right relationship with God and neighbor, let me just be really clear about that. It originated in the demonic realm. And it should scare you a little bit today. If it stands outside the call to right relationship with God and with your neighbor, it originated in the demonic realm. If the wisdom you live out, listen to me, puts in jeopardy your relationship with God by making God and his word subservient to your agenda and your position, your wisdom is sourced in evil. You can stamp it with Christianity all you want, but if it requires you to omit the fact that God calls us to gentleness and mercy, it is not sourced in God. Think this through. Just think this through for a minute. Here's a really good question. Is God constantly agreeing with you? Is he? Because if God is constantly agreeing with you, I have a pretty good idea it's not God. I'm pretty sure it's the God you made him into who really supports all of your positions, agendas, thoughts, and comfortabilities. So if the life you live, brothers and sisters, like if the life that you live out chooses what is best for you, even if it is at the expense of someone else, your wisdom is sourced in the initiator of the fall. Oh, I realize that that's good for this country. I get that. That's great. It's also terrible for everybody else. But I still think it's best for us to do what's best for us. That's not wisdom from above. The bottom line is our lives are disordered because our foundation is upside down. And let me just be really clear about this. I'm gonna be like being your own Lord, your own master, right? It makes you a constant failure. Hear what I'm saying? Because you're really, really bad at it. Not only does it make you a constant failure, it makes you a terrible neighbor. Because it's a never-ending cycle of inadequacy, shame, and guilt, and trying to protect what's yours because nobody else can. And that, brothers and sisters, is not wisdom. That is not God's desire for you. That is not the blessed and happy life. That is the hamster wheel. So this is what James says in verse 17. He says, but the wisdom from above, unlike that, is first pure, then peace-loving, then gentle, then reasonable, then full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and free from hypocrisy. Now, he starts by saying it's pure. This is the Greek word hagnos. Its root meaning is like, if you were looking at it from a Greek, it's like pure enough to approach the gods. So in our case, right, knowing that we are not pure enough to approach the gods, where does wisdom start? If we want to be pure, where does it start? Remember, I told you I'm going to give you real simple questions today. It starts at the cross, yes? Because the only way that we can be pure enough to approach the gods is through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. This is that humble recognition, right, of our need for Jesus. All wisdom begins there. In that place where we are made righteous not by our own choices, not by our own practices, but by the sacrifice of Jesus Christ himself, and then being humble enough to acknowledge that you need it. Second, he says that it's peace-loving. All right? Arini. All right? It means peace. Now, it doesn't mean peace like ceasefire peace. What it means is the right relationship between individuals and between individuals and God. This is the reconciliation of man and God. True wisdom understands that there needs to be right relationship with God, right? And with our neighbor. So true wisdom simply is what he's saying is right relationship. Okay? So we start to see, as we go through this, we can actually use this as a litmus test and go, well, I got a lot of unright relationships. I should check for my sources. You hear what I'm saying? And I want you to hear this because we often will just simply go, well, that's because they're an idiot. Now, I just want you to hear this for a second. That's because they're this, they're that, they're this. That's going back to that same list we just talked about at the beginning, the moment we say that. Let's check our sources. Let's see what is keeping us from being in a right relationship with them. Then it says it's gentle. And I'm going to read what William Barclay said. It says, the true wisdom is epikeis. Of all the Greek words in the New Testament, this is one of the most untranslatable. Aristotle defined it as that which is just beyond the written law. So this is like, remember we talked about the spirit and the letter of laws? It's just beyond that. It's greater than that, actually. And then he said, Aristotle says, justice and better than justice. And as that which steps into correct things, listen, it's that which steps into correct things when the law itself becomes unjust. So when we see the word gentle, hear what this is saying. The person who is gentle or merciful, or however we look at this, is someone who knows when it is actually wrong to apply the strict letter of the law. Such a person knows how to forgive when strict justice dictates that there is a perfect right to condemn. Ha ha, I told you so, idiot. And then it says that it's reasonable. Godly wisdom is reasonable. Same word actually as submissive, and I know that's a trigger word for a lot of us, but he's actually talking to everybody. But if we look at it this way, and I'll use Douglas Moo mostly because I just want to say Douglas Moo. It means easily persuaded. But not, listen, what is not meant, not a weak, credulous gullibility, okay, but a willing deference to others when unalterable theological and moral principles are not involved. In other words, you know what? I don't need to win this argument. It's not going to change how you see who God is, and it's not altering my relationship with Him. I don't need to be right. I have this conversation with my wife a lot because, listen, first of all, she's a better wife than I am a husband. So if I ever have a conversation, I'm like, these are the things we're talking about or whatever, just understand that if it's not like she's much better at being a wife than I am being a husband. But one of her kind of default wisdoms is that anytime you get into an argument, somebody has to win. Right? Like, who's being declared the winner? Which, if she feels like I won, makes her feel bad about herself. And if she feels like she won, makes her feel justified for being angry. And I'm often saying, I don't think anybody wins here, and I don't think we need to have a winner. I think we just need to acknowledge that we hurt each other and go, well, and sometimes hurt each other, and then maybe say sorry, but we don't need a winner. We don't need a winner. It may simply be that we're having this argument because we can't see each other, and the whole point of this is so that we can. And then we can say, I see you. I see you. I see you. I understand you. I don't need to say sorry because I didn't do it with intention. But I do need to say, I acknowledge it. I see you. I'll work to do better. I don't lose, and you don't win. Because you know what? If there's a loser, everybody loses. I'm just being honest with you. So that's what that reasonable thing is. Like, do you have to win everything? You got a problem if you do. Certainly isn't God. God does. Listen, if God needed to win every argument at every moment, we'd all be dead. Was that too honest? Then it says that it's full of mercy. Now, I know we already talked about like gentleness. You understand, like he's really saying this wisdom has this thing. But in this case, because he's going to talk about good fruit and it's connected to it, they're talking about mercy even for those who are in trouble on their own fault. It's the mercy that is reflected in Jesus Christ, who died on the cross while we were yet sinners. He's saying that's the wisdom we need to have, and that we not just know that that's the wisdom that we need to have, but it's the kind of wisdom, mercy that actually has a display. That's the good fruit. So he's saying good wisdom is it defers, and it knows that God is above us and we need him. And then it's also a wisdom that out of our life, people will experience God's mercy through us. The feeling like this, just having this, like all of us, yes, we should I, if I asked you, right, and you're like, hey, should we be merciful? You'd be like, yeah, we should be merciful. That's what we're supposed to do, right? That's taking that feeling of needing to be merciful and turning it into an action. It only becomes godly wisdom when we know that we should be merciful as he is merciful, and then we practice mercy in our community. That's when wisdom becomes alive. And then he says that it's impartial. It says that in this translation. Does anybody have a different rendering of, it might say something like undivided, maybe? What does yours say? Without partiality? So there's a couple of different ways to translate this word, and a lot of translations, partiality, but I think it's probably not right in context. The word, all right, it can mean to doubt or waver or make a distinction. And in this case, because James is really talking a lot, like in chapter 1, verse 6, and chapter 2, verse 4, he says, he's talking about this undividedness, right? Like that the person who is double-minded will receive nothing, yes? And that's in reference to what? Wisdom. So in this case, if I just translate it as it comes through in the context, I really think what he is saying, and many translators would agree with me, is that we're supposed to have this undivided loyalty to God. Like true wisdom is not like this wisdom who goes, you know what, I really like 85% of what God says. 15% I would like to add my own in. And if we were really to like talk about how we live our lives out, it's probably not even 85%. If we were really to seek through our sources, it's probably like 45% Jesus, 25% Oprah, I don't know. 15% our parents, you know what I mean? Like, I'm being serious, right? Like 5% for me, back of cereal boxes from when I was a kid. I mean, because I read that every morning for like 10 years. But what he's saying here is that true wisdom understands that it is undividedly loyal to God. I have one source. One. And I will go on the journey to uncover where that is not true. And I will acknowledge that if that source is not God and his wisdom, I am living out of a place that came from the devil. And that this is not like, oh, I'm such a bad person. It's more of, I acknowledge that things other than God are influencing the way that I think, and I act, and I behave, and I will not sit idly by and just brush it off as my humanness. I will understand that what it really is coming from is something much more sinister. And if I allow that wisdom to continue to inform the way that I live, my life will continue to be disordered, and I will continue to allow evil into the places that I live. Or is that too much wisdom for you today? And then he says that it's free of hypocrisy. It just means like wisdom from heaven, wisdom from above. It's stable, it's trustworthy, it's transparent. The one who has God as their source, right, is safe and dependable. Someone who can be counted on for counsel and in our time of help. Are you that kind of a person? Or is moments of counsel just fuel for stories to tell? And then this is what he says. You know what? I never understood this verse, I'm going to be honest. I just kind of read it and was like, yeah, something about it sounds right. Because it's kind of confusing. Verse 18, it says, and the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Absolutely. Hallelujah. Praise you, Jesus. But this is a summary of everything that he's been talking about. So we talk about fruit, right? What is like? Why is he talking? Like, what time of year is fruit time? And I don't mean like I don't mean season wise. What would we call that when the fruit's ready? Harvest, right? Okay. So what he's saying is, for those of us who want to live that blessed life, we want the fruit. We want to harvest the fruit of right relationship between us and God and us and our community. Those who want the fruit. So that's the fruit of righteousness. He's saying, how do I obtain this fruit? How do I get that harvest? That's what it starts with. So the harvest of godly wisdom, which is the good life, the blessed life, he says, only comes to those who sow the seeds of that good life through the reconciliation of themselves to God and to their neighbor. Does that make sense? He's saying, we want this good life, this blessed life, this happy life. And we think that we can come to it wherever our sources come to, that somehow God has to give that to us. A lot of us will sit in that place. Because we're children of God, he has to give it to us. But James is saying the only way we actually reap that harvest. And I want you to hear this, because, brothers and sisters, a lot of us are disordered in our marriages. We're disordered in our workplaces, in our school, in our other relationships. And there are sinful things that are causing problems. And it's not just, listen to this very carefully. It's not just the sins we're committing. It's just that there is spaces for evil to access our homes, our relationships, our workplaces. And this is not, let me be very clear about this. This is not to make us scared, because we are believing in our sovereign God who overcame sin and death. It's to make us aware of the fact that we are actually on our own contributing to the disorder and sinfulness that is surrounding us, because we are living out of sources that are not godly wisdom, while still wanting and claiming that God should give us a blessed, happy life. And that's foolishness. So the one who sources their actions in the greatest commandment will be the one who lives the good, happy, blessed life, even when the sky is falling. It really comes down to this, because Jesus tells us, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor in place of yourself. You cannot choose self and choose godly wisdom. See, godly wisdom is never acting in such a way that puts what you desire ahead of what God desires. And it means never choosing what is best for you if it is at the expense of someone else. And I've talked about a lot of this today, but the reality is, brothers and sisters, that the great lie of the enemy is that if I don't take care of myself, if I don't look out for me, who will? And what you don't understand, if you don't really unpack that is the antithesis of the gospel. Because what the gospel says, what the Bible teaches us, is that it is God's job to take care of us. That's what he does. That's why Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself. And what happens in this whole thing is, well, I need better. I deserve better. I've got to get better. I need to be safe. I need to be... And all of our actions, slowly but surely, start to being about those things. Well, if I don't make myself happy, who will? If I don't do something for excitement, how will I ever have excitement? The beginning of every addiction is the beginning of us just believing that we have to do something to take care of ourselves, to medicate the issue. And the Bible is telling us time and time again that it is God's job to take care of us and that He's good at it. And that when we can release that, when we can stop having to defend and take care of and look after self, we are freed and released to take care of everyone else. Because we trust God with us. And what happened at the beginning is that Adam and Eve grabbed hold of their own destiny to write their own story sourced in a demonic lie. And today, God is telling us, brothers and sisters, let's stop writing stories with demonic ghostwriters. Let's start writing stories with the Holy Ghost.